coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I pulled a reverse Uno card. Coworker harassed me over having implants, which I only got because I had cancerous cells. I called her out. She reported me to HR for calling her out. I got a bunch of people to write statements of all the times she harassed me, and she got fired instead. 4 years ago now, when I was 24, my mom died of breast cancer, and as both my grandmothers had also died of it, I saw a specialist for a screening. I found out I had some cells in one of my breasts that could have turned cancerous at any given moment. I was told I had a few options. I could have regular screenings every 3 or 4 months until it does develop into cancer, but it could also potentially never turn. So I'd just be getting these screenings for no reason. I could get a single mastectomy on the breast with the bad cells, but they need to keep an eye on the other one, so I'd still need regular checkups for the other breast. Or I could get a bilateral mastectomy and remove all of my breast tissue, basically eliminating the risk. I went for the bilateral mastectomy. It was admittedly the most drastic option, but after seeing what cancer did to my mom and grandmothers, I didn't want to risk it. I was warned about scarring, but told it should be fairly minor. It wasn't, and I was left with 2 huge, pink, jagged scars on either side of my chest, each about 1 inch long and half an inch wide, and it caused me to go into a severe depression, where it got to the stage of me not even leaving my flat because I didn't want people to see me, throwing out my mirrors, and getting physically sick looking at myself. I went to a therapist who suggested a plastic surgeon. The therapist said they'd never normally do that, but it was clearly something I was struggling with and I might never get over it. Although I'll admit the therapist did send me to ask about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon suggested a cream, a laser, or implants. The cream didn't work, and the laser was both expensive and risky, so I went with the implants. My natural boobs were an F cup, so I went with a slightly smaller DD. Since then, my mental health has improved, and I feel a lot better about the way I look. My confidence has gone up, as has my self-esteem. In the present day, I'm 28 years old and working in an office. I'm doing a lot better than I was. My coworker, Jill, found out I'd had a boob job when myself and my friend from years before the mastectomy were planning a holiday, and she made a joke about me going on a plane with my implants, and Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew I'd had a boob job, but not why, and half a dozen people confirmed Jill had told them. Over the next few months, Jill made many jokes and comments about my chest to coworkers when I was in earshot, at one point saying I had more plastic than Barbie and calling me fake in 2 ways. I didn't hear this one myself, but a friend in the office told me that Jill had at one point referred to me as a sack of silicone. I hit my breaking point when me, Jill, and a few other coworkers were having lunch. I referred to something as being shallow, and Jill said, "You know all about being shallow," while gesturing to my chest. I snapped. I said, "Do you know why I have these?" A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy and was left with huge, ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist who sent me to a cosmetic surgeon who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first. For the rest of the day, I had about a third of my office come up to me and offer support, and the rest told me that Jill was just joking around and I was being a bitch. I replied that Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day, and when I called for clarification, they mentioned a hostile work environment. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. I flicked through the contract, and there was a part in the complaint section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I messaged the people who had offered their support and said, "HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face, and are you willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when?" About 20 people were willing to help me. I wrote down the rough times I had asked Jill to stop, a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened, and a list of names of who was there. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page of my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there, and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. I immediately turned to the other HR worker and said, "So, is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer. Debbie read it and said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Supervisor asked how I knew she couldn't be impartial, and I told him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who is on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. Supervisor took a deep breath and asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the four of us all went to review the complaint. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me. The interview went something like this. Question: you said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A. Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Question: why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A. I had no issue with her. Question: what issue does Jill have with you? A. 4 years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery, I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file. Jill found out about my breast implants, but didn't know about the cancer. I provided 16 signed statements from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out and has since made comments about these implants frequently. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breasts, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history, stating the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months, I felt I had to put my foot down. I got back to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour goes by, and then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed.